Hello, welcome back, everybody. It is Red Hot Talk, and Rod is back from his lovely holiday. Brilliant, brilliant. I mean, he just told me all about his experience on a cruise ship, I believe you were in.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. One of the world's largest cruise ships. It's like being in a floating shopping mall. It's
Wow.
ridiculous.
Did you manage to take any photos at all when you're on the cruise ship?
I took a few because I've been on ships before on press trips, and I'm fascinated by the, how can I call it, the architecture and the structures
Yeah,
on the ships.
yeah.
And particularly you get these striking contrasts between white paint and blue sky, which is just looks marvelous. I should have sent some over, Jimmy. Sorry, as an example.
Ah,
But yeah, I got a lot of great shots on the ship, but more of the kind of abstract graphic style
yeah, yeah, yeah,
than
yeah.
anything else.
Did you manage to actually see some like beautiful sunrise or sunset shots?
I did, but the thing is, you always learn something when you do something new, don't you? I learned that on a cruise, a long lens is very useful because you see a lot of amazing stuff from the ship.
Yeah.
And the longest focal length I had with me was 120 millimeter equivalent. Well, quite long enough. So
Yeah.
for sunsets and for passing scenery, a longer lens would have been better. And
So
I think,
what would be in your opinion? What would be the ideal kind of focal length to take on a cruise ship?
well, a couple. I think 70 to 200 for what you see from the decks,
Yep.
and I think for the things I like to shoot on a ship, something very wide.
Yep.
But then, of course, the rest of the time you're off the ship, you're doing the usual tourist stuff. You take whatever
Yeah.
you
Yeah.
would
Yeah.
like to
Yeah.
take.
Yeah.
But for the ship, the shots of the ship, I have to be careful how I say that. Um, that I took while I was away, I think something around 16 or 18 or 20 millimeter,
Yep. Yep.
something quite wide, because that way you get this dramatic
Yes.
convergence and
See the
perspective that
scales
really
and
gives
then
you, yeah.
yeah. Okay, that's interesting to know because I haven't been one myself, so I'm gonna take a lot of note from that, and so then I know what to take with me if I ever go onto a cruise ship.
I mean, it's the thing is, it's a lot nicer than flying, because we all know what flying is like. You queue for security, then
Yeah.
then you queue at the gate, then you queue to board, then you're just jostling past all the other passengers, then you do everything in reverse at the other end. On the cruise ships, which in my case left from Southampton, I think that's the
Yeah.
most common. Um, you drive your car up, stop, somebody takes your keys, you take your cases, you go through a kind of security thing, but then you're on board and your
Yeah.
room's ready, and that's it.
Well, that's
You can,
nice.
you can go and get a martini.
So you did
And
drive the car into the ship.
no. Sorry,
Oh, right.
there's a parking system on the berth.
Right. Right.
This was we went for a package that includes parking. So you go along. There's a bit of a queue. You go into they've got about 5 lanes with people going down each lane,
Yeah.
checking you in. You give them your car keys, get your luggage out. They take it away somewhere, and then you just cross over, go through the dock security, bit
Yeah.
like airport security. But then
Yeah.
when you're through that, you just walk on a ship, and that's it.
Ah, that's cool. That is really
Yeah,
cool.
it is cool. Yeah. And then
Yeah.
coming back, we just left the ship, went to the car parking kiosk. They gave us a key and said your car's in row E, number 22 or whatever. Went to the car, got in, and drove home. So
Ah,
nicer than
has
flying. And of course, you end
very
up in a
smooth.
different place every day. Yeah.
Very smooth.
So
Very
yeah.
smooth. Well, anyway, welcome back, and we missed you last week, and
Oh,
I'm pretty
thank
sure
you.
everybody is. And say hi to Jeff, Carl, and who's Seraphine. So they're all back, all the regulars. I'm pretty sure we're gonna have some fun today, talking a little bit about lenses because that's all we're gonna talk about today. And yes, but as a photographer, many of you would agree that lenses are important, very important. And I think we're going to take it up a notch just a little bit, just to say how important it is, why we should be chasing for the the lens, the dream lens, so to speak, more than chasing for the dream camera, because ultimately the lens is what gives you the look, the aesthetic, the feel of the image that you want to create, not the camera. It's actually the lens. People might got it the other way around, because all the, how the marketing work these days seems to be like everything's down to the camera but not the lens. But in fact, you and I would both agree it's always the lens. So in your opinion, Rod, you think that lenses are something that people should be focusing on, and because you dealt with a lot of different lenses from different brands, from different levels, and you can say a thing or two, like what's your feel about the whole thing we just said?
I think people start from the wrong end of the process. They choose a camera and look for lenses to go with it. But I've been in a situation many times when you've got a great camera, but then you can't find exactly the right lens, or it's too expensive, or it's not quite good enough. So I increasingly feel these days, because I review both cameras and lenses, that now and again I come across a lens where I think, this is worth getting into that system for because of this lens.
Yeah.
Cameras come and go. But lenses, good cameras, every camera's good. Lenses, not so much. I'd say there are a lot of lenses out there, but perhaps, I don't know, I'm taking this figure out of the air. I'd say perhaps 1 in 10, 1 in 20, 1 in 50 is special. Yeah. And if that special lens happens to be on a system you don't use, just think about it. So I think the example I would give from my most recent experience is the Canon RF 10 to 20 millimeter f4, which is full frame lens, spectacularly wide, and also pretty spectacularly good. Now, I'm not a massive Canon fan, but that lens is so good. I've not used any comparable lens on any other system as good as that.
Yeah.
It would make me think, should I get a Canon?
That good, eh?
well, I think we get very fixated on brands and systems, don't we?
We do.
Yes. We kind of pick a brand like Canon or Nikon or Sony or Olympus or our own system or Panasonic, and we feel that that is our brand. We'll stay with that brand. This is us for life.
Yeah,
I get this brand. This brand gets me. That doesn't always work out, especially over time. So, I don't want to kind of revisit the pen thing again, but not every brand or not every camera sub-brand lasts forever. No. You can be left high and dry. Cameras are not for life. Lenses may be a little bit more, but cameras not so much. But I'll give you an opposite example to that. So I've now got a Fujifilm X-T5, which is a terrific camera. But I don't think I'm going to be able to find lenses to go with it that I like as much as the camera. So on my trip to Norway, I took a Fujinon 10 to 24 f4 and 16 to 80 f4, which covers an effective focal range of 15 to 120 millimeters. Focal range is fine. Yep. The constant f4 maximum aperture, that's fine. No problems with any of that. The lenses are great to handle. They focus really quickly and smoothly, but the optical quality is just that little bit off. They're both all right. They're both okay, but with both lenses, when you get to their longest focal length, the sharpness is just going away, especially at the edges. And it's one of those things that once you see it, it just nags at you. And in the Fujifilm range, what choice have I got? I could go for the more expensive 8 to 16 millimeter for wide angle shots. That is a massive lens. and the 16 to 55 as a standard zoom. That's another f2.8 lens. Again, very, very good, but huge. And that's not what I wanted. So the Fujifilm system, I love the cameras. The lenses, so-so.
Yeah.
Whereas I also shoot with Canon RF, Canon full frame mirrorless. I think the lenses are rather good for the money. There's a good selection. They handle nicely. They work pretty well. You get good optical quality without spending silly amounts of money.
Yeah.
The cameras, not so keen. The lenses, they're great. So
Just the complete
it's
opposite.
hard. It's hard. You can't win. You can't win, can you?
No,
but
you can never win.
But of all the things that annoy me, a camera I don't particularly like, well, I can live with. It's not a problem. A lens I don't particularly like, that's harder to live with.
Yeah,
it really is.
Well, to be honest, like I could concur what you said there. I mean, you can always adapt to a camera, so to speak, even if you may not 100% on board with the ergonomic, maybe the menu system, but so long you find where the buttons are to change ISO, the shutter speed, and aperture, you are pretty much good to go. And like I rarely kind of explore 100% what the capabilities the camera offer. Rarely, like even with all the OM1 Mark II that I have, the ZF that I have, whatever cameras I'm testing at a time, I could never fully utilize everything the camera offers in terms of features and capabilities. I just couldn't. I mean, as a portrait guy myself, what more do I need other than changing the exposure triangle? Maybe enable the eye focus or tracking, and that's kind of the things I mostly do. And anything else are literally surplus. And OM1 Mark II, the Live Grad ND is probably one feature that I use quite often when I was traveling. But I'd rarely use like Starry Sky because I'm not astrophotographer. I don't do night shots, so those features I may never ever touch unless I maybe occasionally trying 1 or 2 shots just to see how it feels. But yeah, all the other cameras now are fully capable. Like you said, any cameras are pretty good these days, and looking for the right lens, probably the most difficult part. But then again, as a consumer, as a photographer, let's say you're just starting new in the photography, it's quite hard to find that lens, right? Even though that you say it, it's very important to find the right lens. But if you're not experienced in the world, in the world of photography or in the camera world, you haven't touched or tried a lot of the lenses. It's going to be a very, very tricky thing for anyone who say, "Oh, I like that lens," but you haven't tried it. But it's really hard to gauge, how much you would know unless you actually got the lens in front of you, tried it in your hand, take a few shots, not just a few shots. You need to take a series of shots, then you find out, oh yeah, I really do like this lens. And I think that will probably be the sticking point, right?
I think lots of things will make it difficult, even if you don't start talking about optical quality or rendering.
Yeah,
it's difficult to know what focal lengths you need, and often that changes. Even if you are an experienced photographer, the minute you take on something slightly different, you think, "Oh, I wish I'd got this instead or that instead." So
there's a little bit of a try and error, right? In a way.
Yeah, there is. Yeah, I mean, what I always fall back on for advice, and I think this is a combination I found most useful over time, is a standard zoom, something like 24 to 70 equivalent or thereabouts, with a constant aperture. It's a little bit more expensive, rather heavier, but you'll be glad of that because this is a lens you're going to be using all the time. It does need to be quite good if you can afford it. And in a way, I mean, I think let's have a thing. Let's take the Sony system. Sony's just released well, I'll pick a different example. Take the Sony G Master 24 to 70 f2.8, the Mark II version. It's still a big and heavy lens, not like it was, but it's expensive. It's a couple of thousand, a little bit more. That's a lot of money. So, but I would probably rather choose that lens and a relatively old body. I mean, I've got the Sony A7 II, which is how old. I would rather use that lens and save money on the camera than buy an expensive camera and then wish I could afford a good lens to get the most from it.
I guess you just opened a can of worms there.
Did I?
Well,
Did I? Yeah.
I wouldn't say that, but I'm pretty sure everyone who's listening around, I would totally agree. You know, whenever you get into a new system or whenever you starting your photography journey, people always ask, you know, oh, what sort of camera and lens should we get? And people who
Yeah.
ask me, I often give them the same advice. Don't worry about the body, but
Yeah.
if you can afford, get the best lens you can afford for what you
Yeah.
need. You know, then you worry about the body later. You can just get an entry level body, doesn't matter, but spend on the lens, not on the bodies, you know, because you get a good lens, you know, the rest will follow. Because
So, I mean,
I wouldn't really care about what, whether it's going to be the latest 2024 model or going to be a 5-year-old, you know, body. It doesn't really matter. Secondhand doesn't really matter because one, it's still new to the photography, right? You just don't know whether it's suitable. That's one fun thing. Second is that if you do get into photography, really passionate about it, you will thank me afterwards, saying that, oh, I did get a really good lens. It's a really great quality, and you won't look back.
I think as well, just sticking with Sony as an example, you need to get a lens that suits you physically. So the Sony 24-70 is a big lens. Sony also makes a 24-50, so it's barely more than a 2x zoom, but it's half the price and half the size. So if you're a travel photographer and you find that you take most of your shots in that kind of focal range, that is going to be a better lens to get. So the best isn't necessarily the most expensive. It's a case of getting the right lens, the right focal range, the right form factor and size for you. Then worry about the camera, I think.
I mean, just it's interesting. I mean, I would like to hear your thoughts as well, everybody who's listening right now. And,
please do. Please.
And you know, what would be your lens of lens choice and things that really got you going in terms of photography? Lens that will create images that you appreciate, yet you like, you know, the look of it, the rendering, also suitable for your type of photography and the genre of photography. You know, for me, for instance, I have a whole selection of lenses here, so I'm not trying to use me as an example, but for the trip that I just did in Japan, unlike the other trip that I did in Hong Kong last year, which I took the 12-45 f4 Pro in Micro Four Third, and also the 8-25 f4 Pro together with the 40-150 f4. So all the Trinity or f4 Pro lenses from Olympus OM system. So instead of taking all that three lenses I just mentioned, in this particular trip, I only took this guy here, the 12-100 f4 Pro.
Yeah, I was going to mention that lens, but you carry on.
Yeah, so this is I know optically it's slightly different. The look is slightly different compared to the 12-45. If you really look into the like background rendering and outer focus area, it's slightly different. The reason I chose this slightly bigger lens to replace two of the lenses that I have, the ultra wide 8-25 and the 12-45, is that this is a very kind of flexible lens for me to do everything, and especially it's got a built-in IS. So for me, for my type of things I would like to create for this particular trip, which basically entails both stills and videos, and this is a better lens for me because I know, you know, the camera already have IBIS, but together with the IS on these things is incredible. I was hand holding this lens on the rainy days in Osaka. I was photographing an f8 and stop down to probably about 4 seconds, zoom in all the way to 100, which a 4-second shot is impossible if you without the built-in IS. You know, I probably can just about to do it about 1/10 of a second if I hand holding without tripod, but I was managed with the built-in IS to do it about 4-second shot. So that is incredible. So so I think that gauging on that's kind of the things that I would need for that particular trip. Not suggesting this is the perfect lens for me, no, not by far for me, because I love other lenses, but I got this lens specifically for all my travel needs. And I know f4 may not be f2.8, but I think for what it is, for the reach, for the flexibility, you know, it's giving me the 24 to 200 equivalent full frame range, and an f4 constant aperture and built-in IS. It just literally covers everything that I need. And so one lens, one camera does literally everything. I did take the 40 to 150 f4 Pro for some close-up punching shots, but two lenses are fairly lightweight, and then I just don't need to carry too much for the trip. So that's kind of ideal. I see some people already commenting. Let's see what else here. Chuck, true, and the 70 to 200 G Master 2, this doesn't get as much play as my Ollie 40 to 150. I usually have a pretty good light when I shoot. Well, both are 2.8 aperture, constant, and
sorry, go on,
one does give you longer reach in equivalent term, and I mean, I both are great lenses, but I think the 7200 GM2 are pretty big and pretty heavy, right?
It's quite big, yeah. It's difficult to be inconspicuous with that lens. Mind you, it's not easy to be inconspicuous with the Olympus 40 to 150 2.8. But yeah, the those longer Sony G Masters, they're all wides, of course, so that is, you might just as well have a big flashing sign on your head saying "Warning: Pro Photographer, hide."
Yeah.
No, I think the Olympus 12 to 100 is a very interesting example, because I think anyone who's used a lot of the Olympus Pro lenses doesn't realize how fortunate they are to have reliable and consistent optical quality right across the zoom range and right across the frame. Well, you know, if you use own system or Olympus Pro lenses for a while, you start taking that for granted. And you go somewhere else and you can get a bit of a nasty surprise, because then you discover that most lenses they're variable. Sometimes you need to stop down to get the edges to sharpen up. Sometimes you need to stay away from the last 20% of the focal range because it'll turn to mush. Lenses are very variable. So that 12 to 100, see, that would be one of my examples. If somebody was saying, I want to do travel and landscape photography, what camera should I get? I would say get the Olympus 12 to 100 f4, and they'll say, well, that's a lens, not a camera. And I'll say, well, just get a camera to go with it, because that is the lens that's going to be most useful. See, on my trip to Norway, I hadn't really appreciated how many of the views I would see would be from the deck of the ship as we're going into port or coming out or just passing a coastline. And you do need a longer lens for that. And some of these landscapes, there's a paradox with landscapes, that a spectacular landscape might have the most amazing backdrop, most amazing scale. You think, oh, I need a wide angle to get it all in. Actually, that doesn't give you the sense of scale. It's a telephoto lens and the compression that makes the background look big. And then that's when you think, oh my gosh, that is a big landscape. It's a paradox, but I do wish I'd had that lens with me.
Yeah,
that would have been ideal.
It's always a thing, right? You know, especially in your and maybe perhaps my positions, that we get too many lens choices that we could potentially take, and choosing the right one for the trip is always the hardest.
Well, the hardest thing is getting the right focal range and the right quality within that range. You can generally have one but not the other. You can get a very long range lens that's really not great at the longest focal lengths, or you can get a shorter range zoom that's great at all focal lengths but just doesn't give you the reach. It's very hard and very rare to find a lens that gives you both.
It's been it's very interesting because you know, like, while we're talking about lenses, and we could kind of flip the coin a little bit just to talk a little bit about camera manufacturers themselves. It's quite interesting they brought out a point about, you know, like let's get the lens first, then you get then the body, right? That's the priority. And most manufacturers these days make that mistake by means of they design a body, but there's no lenses to go with it. In terms of like the intended form use of the camera, the system, let's say it's supposed to be compact. Well, let's use the latest Panasonic S9 as since there's a hot topic these days, and the Panasonic S9 is designed to be a small and compact full frame
Ooh.
camera. And I mean, just like I mean, I got the GM1, which is Panasonic Lumix GM1.
Yeah.
It's the smallest Micro Four Third camera, and the
Um,
S9 is supposed to be, you know, one of the smallest, right? And full frame mirrors camera, but there isn't many, you know, small lenses to go with it.
well, they've launched this. They launched it with this really weird little pancake lens, which looks great on the camera, but there aren't many people who are going to find it useful. And they've promised a compact zoom lens to follow, but they haven't said when. Nobody knows anything about it. My beef with the S9 is it really a lot smaller than that? I mean, I don't much like the Sony A7C, but at least it's got a viewfinder.
Yep.
So
Yep.
I think the S9 is just plain weird. But that's a serious point. It is a small camera, but where's the small lenses?
Yeah, you know, we talked about this many times about, you know, many system is supposed to be small, but there is no small lenses and no this and that to go with it.
No.
So like, you would have thought, you know, a lot of the camera makers, I'm not just talking about Panasonic in particular, but all brands are making the same mistakes. They design a camera body, which is fantastic, looking nice and compact or whatever. It looks good, but then there's nothing to go with it. Yes, it is a mount. You can mount any lenses that on it if you really want to, but then they look odd. They look weird. You know, imagine this is the S9, and it suddenly got this big, gigantic f2.8 full frame lens, and it will be literally this sort of proportion, right? You know, S9 with a full frame 2.8 24-70 lens, you would basically have this sort of proportion. Isn't the camera designed to use that sort of optics? I don't think so. They need a specific line of lenses that would go with that body to make it work.
I mean, Panasonic's an interesting point because Panasonic does make some quite useful f1.8 primes. It makes 4 primes that are all the same size, all the same filter size. They weigh the same. So there's a 24, 30, is it 20? 24,
20 to 104, the 105?
No, they're 4 separate primes.
Right.
All the same size. I also remember, I've just finished reviewing a couple of them. They also made the very quite compact 20 to 60 zoom.
Yep.
That's about the same size. But these lenses, they're fine on, they're kind of fine on an S5. They're better on the old S1 or S1R. But on the S9, they're just a bit silly. But I mean, Sony is just trying to make smaller lenses. So there's this is the 16 to 25, which Sony says, look how small it is, but you know, put it on a Sony A7C, and I wouldn't really call that the perfect match. It's doable. It's doable.
Yeah.
But it's not ideal.
No, well let's put it that way. And I think we sometimes we photographers or consumers are overthinking. There are certain compact bodies are simply made to match with certain lenses and lens choice.
Yeah.
You know, even though they have the mount, they're using the same processor, same sensor, whatnot. But you're not going to use those small compact bodies on a gigantic telezooms. You know, it's not built for that. No. You can't handle a system as a whole like that. So the compact bodies are mainly used for like little prime lenses, perhaps, you know, for a daily carry camera, you just want to snap around more than anything else. GM1 is always an example. When it first came out, it's a tiny thing. You know, you can throw a couple of those 1.7 Panasonic prime lenses on, and the 21.7, the pancake lens, is perfect match. But if you throw anything on it, like this one, you throw anything else on it, it's starting to look silly. I can't even hold this properly because there's no grip. It's just ridiculous. So like you can't really use that. So people got to realize exactly what these cameras are for, and I know, you know, marketing can make it look very attractive and give you certain options and things like that. But ultimately, you have to decide as a photographer whether it is actually a suitable body for you. But then let's go back to the lenses. It's the same thing. You know, you got to realize these lenses are to choose the right lens to not only about the rendering, but also about whether you do need, for instance, the 1.2 constant aperture. Do you really need the 1.2 aperture? Do you really need IS, for instance, do you really need weather sealed? I know it's good to have everything, there's no doubt about it. But when you have everything, don't forget that there are a few factors you have to consider: costs and also size. Most of the
Yeah,
time, when you
yeah,
have
sure.
everything, and they will become very heavy, very big. Oh, I want 1.2. You can't have a 1.2 aperture like in a compact body. You can't. You need the iris. You need
No.
the size of the front element to be able to absorb those light, regarding what format you're looking at. There's always going to be big. So
I think I,
yeah,
I think you have to be practical and realistic about what you want to shoot, and I think that we're all talked into chasing ultra fast apertures because obviously it's better. But if you look at how you shoot and what you shoot, especially on full frame, anything faster than f4, I'm just plugging this out of the air, can be an embarrassment because you're trying to do street photography, you're trying to do architecture, you're trying to do landscapes. You don't need shallow depth of field. You need more depth of field. So I think
yeah,
in those situations, you'll often be shooting at f4, 5.6, f8. You don't need a very fast prime. So I mean, I think Sony's got some nice compact primes. I think they're too expensive, but it's got some nice compact primes that are very good in this respect. But
yeah.
there aren't many manufacturers who are that enlightened, really. I mean, Fujifilm does some nice f2 primes, but not really enough for my liking. It's quite difficult. The larger the format you go for, it's quite difficult to find lenses that aren't just too big,
Yeah,
that still do what you need them to do.
yeah.
So I don't I don't know what the answer is. I think maybe just make the cameras bigger, then it'd be all right.
That will solve all the problem.
Well, I don't know if anyone here has shot with the original Panasonic Lumix S1 and S1R.
Yeah,
Those big bruisers, those two cameras, but they go really well with big professional L mount lenses. They balance properly with those lenses. The
yeah.
later S5 and particularly the S9, they don't. So
No.
it makes it more difficult really to know which way to go. I'd almost say if you're going to get some good Panasonic glass,
Yeah,
just buy used S1 or S1R to go with it. Don't buy a new camera unless you need the video.
yeah. I don't think many who are listening will be into videos anyway. But
No, well, this is the other thing to be aware of. That very often what you're paying for
yeah,
is video capability you don't necessarily need. So Sony's linear motor actuators are very, very good. But do you need them to be that good? I can't imagine they're cheap.
no.
So, and things like
So I mean
sorry, no, go on.
that's an interesting way of putting it, though. If so, shoot. I mean, I know this is slightly out of topic now, but then should camera manufacturers kind of go back the old ways by separating the lines between photography-only cameras and video-only cameras? I mean, that you can have one or two models as hybrid, but like not every camera has to be hybrid. In a way, they are these days. Every camera that you release, you have to shout about the video capabilities, whether you like it or not. They always have to do that. And there are a few cameras now out on the market. I mean, talk about brand new cameras that are tailored, that are purely for photography. I mean, Leica is different. Leica, M is definitely a photographer camera, for instance. And but I mean, even though the Fujifilm latest X100VI is basically aiming for photographer, but they still have to shout about the 4K 60 capabilities, the IBIS capabilities, and everything else they're thrown into it. The S9, for instance, is also talking about how stable the video is, but I can't possibly see anyone using the S9 for video because of all the limitations that impose. The screen is not particularly good, not articulated enough, and there's no EVF. It's a cold shoe, not even hot shoes, so you can't do anything with it. And so there are quite a few things that's limited what the camera can be, even though it's got a full frame sensor.
Is there a mic input, headphone output?
I haven't looked into it
Ah,
to be
look,
quite
it
honest.
must
I'm
be a
not
mic. It
entirely
must be a
sure.
mic input. Um,
Yes.
but I do wonder how much the need to cater to video market is affecting lens design, because it means that you've got to have silent AF, you've got to have more advanced AF actuators
Yep.
that give you a kind of smoother, more progressive movement. You've got to have optical adjustment to counter focus breathing. Panasonic does this. Sony tries to do it in software. Um, and also you've got to engineer your focus groups differently to make them small enough to move quickly and silently for effective AF tracking. All of these things, whether or not they cost money, I think they do affect how the lenses are designed, how big they are, and how well optimized they are
Yep.
optically.
Yep.
Because the more you try to make the lens do, I suspect the less effective it's going to be in other areas.
Yes, well, if you look at some simple like a comparison to some of the older EF Canon EF lenses, like the 2470 2.8L lens, I mean, they're still a massive heavy beast by
Yeah,
today's standard because they are pro grade full metal lenses. But compared to that lens to the latest RF 24 to 70 2.8, the size difference is significant. I'm talking about RF even bigger and heavier. So like I'm
yeah,
pretty sure that a lot of that is to do with what you just said there. Is cater for a lot of the motors redesigns and making sure
yeah,
they are capable for focus tracking in video terms. Um, um,
yeah,
the older design was a lot simpler. They didn't need to look into all these video stuff. It's pure photographic AF point-to-point focus. It's nothing to do with a lot of this tracking stuff that we talk about these days.
yeah. I also worried that they're not really trying to correct for distortion anymore. I mean, I'm not
No,
worried for stills photography because it's easy enough to do it
in post, yeah.
in software, yeah. But if you're shooting video and you do want to shoot raw, should the day come when that becomes practical for everyone, there won't be any lenses that shoot uncorrected raw. I've even used primes that need software correction to create just a little bit of barrel or pincushion
Yeah, yeah.
distortion. Whereas older DSLR lenses, a lot of them weren't very good, but at least they were corrected for distortion. I think often doing the distortion correction compromising in other areas. They're often quite bad at color fringing. But I
Yes.
suspect you could fix color fringing in video much more easily than you could correct distortion. I don't know.
Well, the distortion does, well, whether stills or video, does come as a penalty that you will guarantee to lose pixels. And
And well, you're also expanding the corners,
yeah,
so you will inevitably, however good the lens is, you'll inevitably lose a little bit of quality in the corners. It may not be
yes.
enough to matter,
No.
I think it's there.
I mean, that's when we said it, I think a couple of weeks ago, that's a reason why cine lenses are so expensive, because they are optically corrected, optically, perfected, in a way that edge
Yeah,
to edge is sharp, like no matter what sort of range you're looking at, and wide open or not, everything's going to be pixel perfect. And that's why those lenses are costing 30, 40, 50,000 pounds a piece. They are that
yeah,
pricey for a
quite.
reason, because they use optimal premium elements and design to make sure that you are getting the quality that you require. So everything that we see in the photographic world that aiming for video use are nowhere near the professional video lenses that you see used by pros. And even though that, yes, is consumerized, a lot of pros or professional videographers do use consumer lenses. That's how we define them, not the cinema lenses, because who can afford 40,000 pound a piece lens? Not many, unless you got a big budget production house. Most of us small businesses who making video for money or for living won't be able to afford that sort of budget, and so we'll be using a simple Sony whatever camera that you have, and you just bung a G Master lens on it and just use it that way. And like you said, if one day everything become easier to shoot with RAW, and people will soon realize, okay, all these lenses that we bought, like even though they might
Every lens for the past 10 years I can't use.
yeah, it's all wrong.
I mean,
That
as as well, this thing about lenses getting bigger. I'm sure I've weighed this lens in front of you before, but
Yeah,
that is a full frame 24 to 120
yeah,
f4.
yeah,
Um, I don't think you'll find a modern mirrorless 24 to 120 f4 as small as
yeah,
that. Well, I haven't told you, it weighs about 500 pounds,
yeah.
but at least it's small. So I don't know. I think lens design for photographers
No.
is
So
kind of heading in the wrong direction a lot
so
of the time.
this is the question for you guys to think about. I mean, I don't know whether you agree with me or not. And should really camera makers to start, going a step backward, just to think about, us photographers who don't necessarily need video capabilities. Should they really focus on go back to basics? Having some that really capable stills cameras. Having something very simple optics, but good optics. You don't need to be super amazing and because simple design can be achieved quite easily. Especially in primes. Like I'm talking about 50 primes, 35 primes and 85 primes. These are they can be very simple, really just a tube with a few glasses in it, and still giving you pretty good results. But the lens elements I see these days, the design that I see from the diagram that they sent me, they're all very, very complicated, and it sometimes makes me think twice. I know you're trying to justify the cost, you're trying, the price that people are paying these days, but a lot of the older Leica optics, I'm talking about like 60s and 70s. Some of those Leica optics are really, really simple, but they give you extremely good quality. They may be only f4, not 2.8 or 1.2, but like what we just talked about, you don't necessarily need f2.8 or f4 all the time. Some of these older optics, 4 or 5.6 are already sufficient.
Yeah, I think I'm old enough to remember when lenses didn't have internal focus groups. You just racked the whole lens in and out. That was focusing. But I think the more we want from our cameras and lenses, the more complex the designs have become. I mean, it's inevitable, really. But I think isn't there a Leica lens which is an f5.6? It's not an Elmar. It's another one. It's a really compact. It might be a 35 or 28. I'm not sure. I can't think of it right now.
No, it's the 28 5.6.
But you look at that and you think, oh, that's just ridiculous. 5.6, ridiculous. But anyone who takes photographs outdoors in regular daylight will often be at 5.6 or 8 or f11. So you can't just dismiss these specs just because they're not up to modern expectations. I've got a Nikon 50mm f1.7 prime for my D800. Do I ever use that at f1.7? No, it's an embarrassment because only one thing is in focus. How often do you shoot a scene where only one thing is sharp?
yeah. Well, but I guess we talked a little bit about that. I think in a few chats before, and when a lot of people, a lot of photographers, especially new photographers, they thought I just spent £2,500 to get this G Master 51.4. I've got to shoot at 1.4 because that's what I'm paying for, the 1.4. So
I know.
I don't want to stop down. Why do I want to stop down? I pay for that 1.4.
So I'd say anyone who's going to spend that money on an f1.4 probably does want to shoot at f1.4. But what I would also say is that is an expensive lens. Don't spend a lot on the camera. You don't need to. It's the lens that matters here. You'll get the look that lens gives you on any A7 body from the original A7 onwards.
Yep.
The camera is not the most important factor in this particular equation. If you might have spent all that money and you think this lens has so much resolving power, I need a body that can show all that resolution. Well, then I'd say maybe get a used A7R2 or 3 or 4. The 4 is 61 megapixels. You don't need a new body for stills photography. There's some very good older bodies out there that will help you recover a bit from how much you spent on the lens.
Yeah, I mean, I really remember when I first started photography, and the person who inspired me to get cameras, he told me the first thing was, like, don't worry about the camera bodies, and just think, like, get a couple of good primes, good primes. You don't have to get a 1.4. I mean, the 1.4 was the good standard back then. The expensive one. So just get a 1.8 is good enough. But get a good quality one, and you won't regret it.
Yeah.
And then you can upgrade your body anytime later when you're becoming proficient in using the camera and also becoming a better photographer. So don't worry about getting the latest model or the top end model that you probably pay by three times the price that you will be getting the lower end one, and because you rather spend the money on a better lens or maybe even a higher gray lens than getting the body, because the body will always go out of date, will wear out eventually, and then you will best having a good lens for life than having a camera that will last you for about 5 years.
So if we rewind about 15 minutes probably to the 12 to 100, remember that.
Yes.
If somebody said to me, I want a camera for travel,
Yep.
I want a camera for travel, I would say, get the 12 to 100, and they'll say, you haven't told me what camera to get. I say, it doesn't really matter. Get an EM1 EM1 OM1 if you can afford it. That doesn't really matter, but you need to get that lens. I'd do it that way around, I think.
Yeah, and I just find it quite interesting. I think I'm looking at Angelo play for one. Comments quite interesting. So I'm just trying to read the text. Robertson from Lumix USA has discussed this issue many times at Lumix Live. He said that the modern digital camera is a video camera that takes still photos, hence the price will be the same.
Yeah.
I wouldn't disagree with you, because in a sense they are video cameras, because the EVF is projecting, the sensors, what the sensors read constantly.
I would think by now it costs no more to make a sensor with fast readout and a high-speed processor than it would cost to make a weaker one.
Yep.
So I'm not sure we're necessarily paying a price penalty in the cameras, but I do wonder if it's changing our lenses and making those perhaps a little more elaborate than they need to be. I don't know. I've got no evidence for that, but I think a lot of people are worrying, I don't want video. How much is it costing me in a camera? I'm not sure it's costing very much, because, the dies are made, the chip foundries are up to speed, the R&D's been done. I can't imagine it's a whole lot more expensive than if they took it away. But yeah, the lenses, it makes me think with the lenses a bit. But yeah, I don't know. I think if you were to say which maker has the best video lenses, that would be more difficult. But I guess right in this chat, we're not that interested in the video side of things. We're just interested in lenses.
Yeah.
Whether you should look at the lens, then the camera, or whether there are any lenses you've seen that would make you jump ship and choose another system.
Yeah, and there's another comment here. Chuck just saying, my first lens was the $100 51.8.
Yeah.
Other than a little bit of a wonky focus mechanism, it was quite serviceable. and to be quite frank, people have underrated a lot of these 51.8 lenses.
Yeah.
And really is. I mean, since the day they were born, literally, like many people, when they first got into photography, when they're thinking about a standard prime, they're always thinking about, I've got to get a 1.4, like it's better this, better that. But then the 1.8, despite it's only being a little bit slower than the 1.4, but significantly cheaper, significantly smaller and lighter, people often just don't think about this 1.8 lenses. And
do you think there's a bit of snobbery involved?
I'm not entirely sure what it is, but then it is the case, because I remember when I was still shooting with Canon, and I'd never had a 50 prime at the time, and so I just went straight to the 2470. But the 50, whenever I speak to any Canon photographers or people in the Canon cam, they were saying, don't get a 51.8, just go straight to 1.4. But from it's a weird comment that they give me, or advice that they gave me at the time. Similarly these days, I know a lot of Olympus or OM system users would often discard the also equivalent thing, the 25 1.8, which is a tiny little creature right here. And then they would say, oh, if you want the best quality, go straight to the 25 1.2 Pro. And that is like 3 times the price, 2 times the size, and 2 times the weight. And don't get me wrong, the 24 1.2 is my workhorse. It's brilliant. It's really great lens. It's really amazing. I like the feather bokeh. But doesn't mean that this little guy here is any bad. And I shot with this. It's sharp. It's plenty sharp. It's got enough light gathering. 1.8 is really isn't that much slower than 1.2. And in most situations, I doubt that you will see much difference unless you are really looking into the a pixel peeping stage, when you're really blowing out, trying to see fringing here and there, you're trying to see the bokeh rendering. There will be subtle differences there. That's for sure. But in a day-to-day thing, like you said, if you're shooting daylight, stopping down to 5.6, I don't think many people will actually notice any difference.
No, and I think as well, it's quite hard to get the best from even a mediocre lens. You camera shape will spoil it, bad focusing will spoil it. Your technique does have to be very good, and often when your technique is good, you find that cheaper lenses are better than you thought. Yeah. So I think a lot of the bad reputation for 50mm 1.7s perhaps comes from users who don't have much money. They're just starting out. Their technique may be, a little shaky, and they think, oh, my pictures are terrible. I should have got the f1.4. Well, not necessarily. Maybe you just need a bit longer to understand the limitations of your camera, the conditions, the camera settings, and then you might find that lens is better than you thought it was.
Yeah,
I think I've used a number of 51.7s, and used with a little bit of consideration, I think they're pretty good. I mean, they may not be great wide open, but a lot of f1.4s, especially the older DSLR ones, they're not great wide open either. But get down to f4, f5.6, they're really rather good.
Which is perfect for day-to-day normal stuff.
Yeah. And also, they're quite small.
Yes.
And they don't weigh much. And if you accidentally walk into a door and knock your lens, or heaven forbid you scratch it, well, it's just a cheap 51.7. It's not the end of the world.
No.
If it's a Sony 51.2, that would be a problem.
And you spend another 500 quid to buy insurance to insure that lens.
Yeah, and then you've got to pay the owner of the building whose door frame you just took out.
Never win.
No.
Look, I just look at a comment here. Jimmy, could you describe feeling of using my new Voigtlander? And if possible, could you try sum up what makes Voigtlander special? Because I'm quite interested in the okay, the Super Nocton. Okay, right. Although my review hasn't been done yet, and I could quickly tell you that it's special, that lens, and but you have to be quite proficient in operating a manual focus lens, because it is manual focus, as you know, and it isn't autofocus. So I wouldn't say this lens is good for track anything is fast moving, I would say, but it's doable. I mean, I have trained myself in doing that, photographing moving subjects with a manual lens, because I've done this with my Leica, and way back when I started with all this rangefinder photography, way back in the 90s. So I'm pretty proficient in actually using manual focus lenses to track rather slow moving objects. I wouldn't say I could do that with a football match or any basketball player. No, you definitely can't do that. You have to use AF for those. No. But manual focus, you can get something done in moving subjects. But the actual feeling of it, I think a lot of the Voigtlander lenses are known for their rendering. And because that's quite a good point, actually, because we are talking about your lens. And Voigtlanders have this kind of really special look, especially when you shoot wide open. It does give you that vintage look in a way, a little bit of a glow. I wouldn't say like a massively glow like the 1950 Leica lenses. This very modern glow, if I can separate it into different era, is very different in terms of look. overall, I would say most of the Voigtlander that would give you that kind of look, and the Super Nocton, because being a f.8 lens, it does exaggerate that look quite a bit because you got shallow depth of field by straight out the box, and that look is just simply magnified, so you can see everything in a very special pop in a way. So I quite like that, and as much as I often discourage people shooting everything wide open just to get a shallow depth and get bokeh. But this particular lens, being a micro four third lens, a 29mm is equivalent to 58mm in full frame. Even though it's an f/0.8, it isn't f/0.8 in terms of full frame depth of field, so to speak. You kind of like have to factor that in. So it's more behaving more like an f1.6, 1.8 kind of category. So it isn't super, super shallow, which is enough still to recognize the background. And that's where the special look comes from, the Voigtlander Micro Four Third lens, because it does give you that kind of look. And I like it. I really, really enjoy shooting with that lens, even though it's a little bit pricey, but I think that it's worth the money if you're going for that kind of look. And being a 58mm equivalent in full frame focal length is rather versatile. It's almost like a 50 lens, almost like a day-to-day standard lens. So it's not too wide, it's not too narrow, so you can do all kinds of stuff with that lens. You can do half-length portrait if you really want to. Everything is super cool. Any downside? Well, like all Voigtlander lenses that I've tested and used in the past, there's always a little bit of a problem with fringing. I have to say that. But the Super Nocton, being one of their top range lenses, it does control quite a bit better than all the other lower ranking lenses. So you still see a little bit of it, but not as bad as other Voigtlander lenses that you pay £600-700 for, because this is literally £1,600-1,700 lens, so it's quite a bit more. So they do factor that in, probably using a little bit better design, better elements to avoid some of these defects that you get in the lower lenses. So if you want to get it, and I think probably worth your while. I don't know how many years Voigtlander will continue to make this lens, because it's a very low production lens. It's a specialist lens. It's not something that I would say every photographer would appreciate or be able to utilize it, simply because it's manual focus, ultra shallow depth of field, and also being a micro four third. It's not, well, I would say this, they're not a mainstream format that everybody would look for. So but if you do get one, I don't think you'll regret it. That's all I can say. I seem to have already given my review.
Yeah, you just need a text to type tool now. Remember those, just to transcribe that. So I've got a Voigtlander, but it's very different to yours. But I think it's just
like this one.
The color scope are. I do, but it's really a film lens, and it can give trouble on some sensors. Also, I suspect mine isn't perfectly centered, because it's a little softer on the right edge than the left, which bothers me. But I think this is an interesting discussion, because I think we've forgotten how much lenses have changed physically. Yes. So size is one aspect. Yep. This is a 35mm f2.5, and it, if you take away the part that goes in the camera, this is a very thin lens. The other thing we've forgotten is that with mechanical helicoid focusing rings have a completely different feel to modern lens focus rings. You have the smoothness and the inertia of an engineered what's the word? Well, it's a helical coil, isn't it? You can feel the engineering that's in there. It's got a completely different inertia and smoothness and travel to a focus by wire modern lens. The other thing is that manual focus lenses take quite a long time to adapt to. The first couple of times you use it, you're thinking clearly, and you think before every shot, and it's fine. It's later on when you just in more of a rush, and you've forgotten what you've learned, and you need to relearn it. It's later on that you start to find manual focusing. Oh gosh. And sometimes you forget, sometimes you move it. it's just a different thing. But but what they do is they actually reconnect you with the whole idea of depth of field and zone focusing in a way
Yeah.
that you just don't get with a modern lens. Now, not everybody needs that or wants that, but if you do any kind of street photography or perhaps hyperfocal landscape photography, it's actually a lot easier with an old lens like a Voigtlander than it is with a modern lens.
Mm.
But
Absolutely.
I
Well,
but I wouldn't buy a camera just for this lens.
but I mean, I've heard that the Sculptor 2. The 2.5 is actually has some very interesting look as well to the
It
lens.
does. It is. It's a little bit vignetting of wider apertures, but I've never seen a lens with so much contrast and pop. And I'm used. You associate that with digital lenses, don't you? But this one gives. I can't easily describe it. It
Yeah.
has a very analog look to it, but
Yeah.
the contrast is really whoa, and it's very rich, saturated colors. I wouldn't normally like to ascribe that to a lens, but with this one, its behavior is so noticeable that I just have to mention it. It's a bit like using Leica M lenses on other cameras. Leica M lenses are a bit like this one. They are contrasty,
Yeah.
and sometimes you look at them and you think, "What's gone wrong here? This is too much." It's just part of the style.
Yeah, yeah, it's certainly well. Don't forget a lot of these older M lenses, they were designed for film cameras,
Yeah,
and back in the days when film negatives and having a little bit more black into in images. I mean, high contrast. It certainly has a very I would say a contrasted image makes it look a bit sharper.
I think as well. These are simple lenses. This one's probably only got 6 or 7 elements,
Yep.
as opposed to 16 or 17. Now, when you've got a dozen or more lens elements in a lens, it's always going to be a struggle for the lens designer to keep the contrast high, which is
Yep.
why I think a lot of these older vintage lenses do have such a punchy look,
Yep.
because there's
Yep.
really that the light is only going through 6 elements instead of 16.
Yeah. Of course. I'm just reading some questions here. I think it's quite interesting. First of, I'm just going to bring one up first. I think Angelo say that a question to you, Rod.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Which system has the best lenses for high-end enthusiast photographers?
I just want to throw that back very quickly. How much do you want to spend on a lens? Because that
That dictates
will,
everything, literally.
it does. All right, I'll give you an answer. If say £1,000 is your comfort limit for a lens, I think I would say Olympus, uh, Fujifilm with some caveats, maybe Canon full frame, if you don't mind primes, because I think if you look at lens ranges as a whole and how much performance you get for the money, I think Canon comes out of it pretty well. I think Olympus OM system comes out pretty well with the pro lenses if you can stretch it to a little over 1,000. I think Nikon Z is more troublesome because
They're expensive.
those good lenses, they are expensive, and they don't really do any. There's a 1.2, isn't there, Jimmy? Is there a 51.2? But there's no real 1.4s.
No, I think they skipped the 1.4. They have to go 1.2, and the next one
Yeah,
up is the 0.95, which is the ridiculously
yeah,
priced £8,000 lens.
it's a manual focus lens. It's just nonsense in my opinion. But actually, so just quickly going off topic, I would mention another lens that you might want to swap systems for. I don't have one with me. It's a lens that everyone's forgotten. It's the Fujinon 50mm f1. Now I have it's slightly long, 75mm equivalent, but wide open. if you like your bokeh and background blur, that lens does it. That is a cracker. But it, unlike the Nikon Noct, it's £1,500 or dollars, not 8,000, and it's got snappy, well, reasonably snappy AF. It's a practical lens you can afford, but it has a beautiful, beautiful look. So if that's the look you like, you know, it's almost worth getting that lens, and what any XT camera will be fine with that. You know,
Yeah, I mean,
you don't need to worry too much about the camera.
I think Rod and I actually talked a little bit about that before the stream started. Is that I think every camera manufacturer should have a signature lens that draws people in for that particular system. You know, like Leica has their famous Noctilux. You know, this is kind of like the crown jewel for the M system, where not only just for the speed but also for the look, for the rendering it generates. It just completely different to any lenses you will come across. It's just simply what they always say, the Leica look is it's a signature for Leica, and you got lenses like that in a lot of different systems. Voigtlander's the 29 f.8 is another lens I just told you about, and even though it's not made by Olympus or Panasonic, which are
I'll be frozen, Jimmy.
Oh, you are frozen. You are frozen. I'm not sure what happened there. Oh, I hope everyone can still hear me.
Things are frozen on my end, so I think I'll just reconnect.
Okay, no problem. And so this is the Voigtlander is actually very interesting lens, even though it's not made by Olympus or Panasonic, who are really the main two player for Micro Four Third camera bodies. So Voigtlander made somehow a signature lens for Micro Four Third. That's how I see it, even though it's a little bit of awkward thing. And although having said that, I mean, I think the Olympus 1.2 prime lenses are equally good. You know, especially if you want for the look. The 17 and the 45 1.2 are really amazing for what you can get when you shoot wide open. And it's the kind of aesthetics that you won't get anywhere else. That I know it was a marketing term when Olympus first launched these 1.2 Pro prime lenses. They all talked about feather bokeh. I mean, I thought it was like a marketing gimmick. But the more I shoot with this lens, I mean, the thing is, I've been shooting with these 1.2 Pro prime lenses for years, since they were launched. So it's been 5, 6, 7 years now. And the more I shoot these lenses, the more I realize how special these renderings are. I mean, I don't know whether they're feather bokeh or not, but they are certainly different to any other lenses that I've used before regarding what format I used. And I mean, even if I use shallower depth of field full frame lenses, I just simply can't get that look coming from these lenses. And so yeah, they may have a point there. There's a feather bokeh, maybe there's a thing, and they called it feather bokeh. But yeah, the way they design the lens about this autofocus area is simply special. Same thing can be said for Voigtlander, and hence I love using these lenses because they are just simply different and special for me as a photographer. I can't say for everybody else's, of course, and I'm not entirely sure whether this is something that you would like. You know, if, everybody's preference would be different, so we just have to kind of gauge it by looking at maybe some photographers' photos to see if you know, this sort of aesthetic is what you really, really like. You got frozen a little bit again, Rod. Oh, you got no sound. Hang on a second. 1 second. Oh, it's gone again. I think there's some trouble from Rod's end this time, not mine. Okay. Let's. Oh, Rod is back.
I'm back. Yeah, I think I need to put some new batteries in my modem.
Okay, well, glad you're back. Glad you're back.
Yeah.
So let me know you guys what you guys think. For those who have used 1.2 prime lenses from Olympus, let me know your thoughts about feather bokeh. I see it the way I see it, and from the photographs that I generated, I'm not. Obviously cannot speak for everybody else's, whether they feel the same way as I do. Certainly there are other lenses got different renderings. So like I said, Noctilux from Leica is another special lens. But obviously it costs a kidney or two to buy that one. Same as the Nikon Note, the 0.95 lens as well. That's about $8,000, so that's not a cheap lens either. Quite often, a lot of these signature lenses are quite expensive, and I have to say they're not cheap lenses. But whether you like it or not, like we said, if you want to invest, I would rather invest in a lens than a body. Whatever you can afford, I would go for the best lens you can afford at the time, and then go from there.
So Angelo came back to me about lens ranges and mentioned Panasonic, and he's right. I think if you're looking for a system that has a good selection of affordable lenses that perform well, I think Panasonic, the Lumix S range, is pretty good. They're not the most exciting lenses in the world, but they are affordable and effective. And especially if you shoot video, for some reason, Panasonic has decided to suppress focus breathing optically, which is good. I don't know why Sony can't do that, but there we are. So yes, I'd say Panasonic's a good call for solid value and performance. If you want stellar performance, you probably ought to be looking at probably Sony and maybe some of the Canon L lenses, perhaps Nikon too, but then you're getting very expensive. You're into expensive professional photography there. And if the question is about good enthusiast gear, I think Panasonic's got some very interesting options. Yeah. They're not dramatic. They're not exciting, but it's
effective.
It's just a nice. They're effective. The AF is quiet. It's instant. There's very little focus breathing I can see. They've got a set of lenses. They're all quite compact and quite light, and they're not too expensive. So on a practical level, I think Panasonic's done quite a good job. I'm just not sure that Panasonic is very effective at marketing what it's trying to do. I saw somebody also made the remark that Panasonic said, all our research says that people upgrading from smartphones, I'm sure they don't speak like this, but all the people upgrading from smartphones don't use the EVF. Well, I don't suppose they do, but I can't help thinking that anyone who's swapped to a mirrorless camera from a smartphone is going to have a period of rather intense disappointment when they figure out that they can't just send a picture straight from the camera. And they do weigh a lot, and the screen is half the size.
Yeah, I mean, I think the screen is the main disappointment. I think especially for those who are upgrading from smartphone to proper camera. Yeah. Any camera, no matter which brand, expensive or not, you will not find a better screen than a phone. The phone screens have the best screen technologies, on the market, full stop. You won't get a high pixel density screen. You won't get as vibrant. You won't get as much contrast. These are super intensive OLED technology that you won't get on the back of the screen. So you will be very disappointed, first, on image quality. Second, responsiveness. You won't get the same tap and scroll and swipe and pinch. You won't get any of that on the camera. Even if they do support gesture, you won't find it as fast or as effective as a smartphone.
And if you do want to put something straight on Instagram, you've got to persuade your phone to talk to your camera, which will still take half a minute, no matter how many times you've done it before. And then you might be restricted to a low resolution version. Then you've got to fiddle with the app on the phone to pick the images you want from the camera. It's just horribly slow. It is. I just don't understand what the marketing pitch there is. And I think as well, if this is an argument that smartphone users won't use an EVF or don't use an EVF, well, if this is their first camera, how do you know? They're not gonna pick it up and say, oh, there's no EVF, I don't care. They're more likely to pick up a camera with an EVF and say, oh my gosh, I wish I'd had this before. So I don't believe a word of it. I think not putting an EVF on a camera is at best dangerous, and at worst a mistake.
Yeah.
Some you can get away with it. I think the Olympus pens get away with it because they're small enough to stick in your pocket. You're not expecting much.
No.
But something like the Lumix S9, this is a full frame camera being pitched as like a professional vlogging tool. I think you're going to want an EVF, not straight away, but soon
Well,
enough.
Well, I mean, I think a lot of early reviewers has already pointed it out. It isn't really vlogging cameras because the 15 minutes limit on the video side is pretty limiting.
How many?
15 minutes.
15.
15
What?
apparently, yes.
4K 30.
Yeah.
Since when? It's been a long time since we had 15-minute recording limits. What
Yeah,
is
well,
that
I
for
don't know whether it's to do with thermal because it's quite a small body. I'm not entirely sure. Don't get me wrong, I'm not an expert, and there are plenty
interesting.
of videos out there already talking about the S9. So I think I would just reserve for those who are experienced and handle those cameras to talk about them. Then I'm just speculating on the side.
Well, I mean, I think a filmmaker probably wouldn't shoot a 15-minute take, but a vlogger would. And if you want to use your camera for live streaming, you're going to need it to run for more than 15 minutes, aren't you?
Yes, you do.
And if you're using it for this, you need it to run for a couple of hours.
But for a camera to be marketed for video use or for vloggers, which are basically video use, and I think that's a little bit on the backward side than moving forward.
Well, I think vlogging is a very different discipline. Very often you will need to just leave the camera running.
Well, you go
Because
to
you
a place,
don't-
you want to
you
film
don't-
the whole thing. Yes.
And you don't quite know when you're going to need to stop recording. I mean, if you're making a commercial or a feature film, you'll have a script, you'll have a storyboard, you'll know where you are. But if you're vlogging, you don't know how long you're going to have to leave the thing running.
Yeah.
And also, if you're quite new to it, you'll probably start filming straight away and without really having any clear idea of how you're going to finish it.
Yeah. And I'm also looking at Angela's comment as well. He was asking, where is it gone now? I can't find it anymore. He was asking which brand is better for portrait, astrals, and all the other stuff. I'm trying to find it. You're opening a really big can of worms there, and I don't think there is a perfect system for everything. You just have to work within the limitation of the cameras, and to be quite honest, these limitations I'm talking about are virtually non-existent for most photographers, simply because you will never get to that sort of limit. Because ultimately, in any genre of photography, you have everything you need in any camera you buy these days, regardless of whether it's going to be a £500 or $500 camera to £5,000 cameras. I think you have everything you need to do those stuff. Yes, you may not have pro capture, pre-buffer shooting. That's what is another technical term for it. So basically, you half press the shutter, you start recording frames in 60 frames per second, whatever frame that you set it to. And so you won't miss the moment. So that's the kind of key things about this technology. But unless you're in that category, that you're constantly photographing a lot of these high-speed moments that you may potentially miss because you're not reacting fast enough, then these type of technologies or a method will be crucial and critical for your success. And not that you can't do it with normal cameras, because photography has done it before this sort of thing happened. So I'm pretty sure you can do it. It's just that you need to be very familiar with your subject, very knowledgeable about their behavior, when they're going to do certain things. You need to look at their actions and predict what they're going to do next. So because a lot of the photography, whether animal or human, even street photography, is all about anticipation. You know, like you go into a scene, you anticipate a moment, and then you are getting ready for that moment. It may or may not happen, who knows? But then you are anticipating it.
It's understanding behavior, isn't it?
Yes.
So the more experience you gain, the more you work out where you're going to need to be and what's going to happen, so that you're ready. So when you're first starting out, and especially I think for novice vloggers, they're constantly chasing the picture instead of being where the picture's going to be. So you're photographing your friend, you're constantly 3 feet behind them, running after them, doing this, trying to film them. But as you get experience, you figure out I'm going to need to be 50 yards up the road, still filming them coming towards me. So very often I think the tech and the focus tracking people look for in vlogging cameras and stills cameras is sometimes just to cover up a kind of lack of planning. I think for sports photographers, you definitely need
Yeah,
very good, fast AF. For video, video needs more planning than a lot of people give it, I think.
yeah. I think it works both ways as well, and I think for the experience, these technologies would definitely help them capture more successful frames and successful videos because they know what they're doing. And these technology would definitely speed up the process and get more accurate results. But for the unintended, for the uninitiated photographers, and these technology may come as a novelty, and they think that they may need them to take these shots, but you don't really need them to take these shots if you're experienced enough to do it. So there are two ways of looking at it. I mean, I think that they're great inventions, but you shouldn't, as a photographer, rely 100% on these technologies because, as you know, a lot of these technologies doesn't always work. And I particularly a person who used iFocus a lot because it helps my portrait photography. But I can also tell you that no matter what camera I use now, and this iFocus technology doesn't always work, and also doesn't always give me accurate results. And I mean, I've tried full frame, I've tried APS-C, and I've also tried Micro Four Third, and all three formats that I've tried, they always give me, I would say, 95% accuracy. You know, if I'm being generous, but a lot of situations, you just simply won't get it. The camera will refuse to focus, and they will look for somewhere else, and then it just will give you false results. So you can't always rely on these sort of technologies. You just have to be proficient as a photographer to gauge whether it is doing the job or not, and then you have to manually override it if it doesn't work.
I think as well, there is often a bit of a disconnect between what the camera says is the focus point and whether the lens can actually get there in time. So if you're shooting at, say, 10 frames a second, your camera might show the focus point over your subject's eye in real time, tracking it perfectly. That is only what the camera thinks. It's still got to tell the lens to do it. And if your lens is a kind of old school, quite sluggish lens, it's not going to be able to do it. So you're kind of getting a confirmation in the viewfinder, but you're not getting the shot. You know, what you see in the viewfinder is not necessarily what you're going to get sometimes. I think also just to go back to another comment from Angelo, Canon AL lenses are very expensive, sometimes more than the G Master from Sony. Yeah, they're equivalent. Nikon is not expensive. I can't agree there, because if you compare like for like, a Nikon 24 to 70 2.8 or 70 200 2.8, they are absolutely in the same ballpark. The cheaper Nikon lenses, there's some 1.8 primes and consumer lenses that are not equivalent to L lenses or G Masters.
No.
I think once you're talking about professional level full frame lenses, you're talking big money, whichever brand you go for.
Yeah.
It's kind of enthusiast level. Each manufacturer has lenses for them too, but I think there you get a little more variation.
I mean, I guess, you know, and if you're really looking at just pricing levels, and you have to kind of separate into formats. The bigger the format, usually the more money.
Pay.
Yeah,
it's more glass. More glass, AF motors with more torque because you've got bigger focus groups. Everything is bigger and more expensive using more material.
And despite many has complained about like Micro Four Third Pro lenses are expensive, but like I said, like for like, if you're looking at pro grade Micro Four Third lenses compared to pro grade APS-C camera lenses, APS-C is always more expensive than the Micro Four Third. And then when you compare to the full frame will be even more expensive. Then if you move up to medium format, they will be even more expensive. So it's all relative to in a way to the actual format.
I think, it's a very complex argument, but if you take something like the Olympus 7-14 f2.8, yes, it's for a smaller format, and f2.8 doesn't give you the same depth of field effects that it would on an equivalent larger format lens. Putting that aside, you still get the same exposure equivalent, so you're still getting the exposure, the shutter speeds and the apertures in the same lighting that you would. So there is exposure equivalence there. But anyway, this lens, what would it cost to buy today? I think, what's it going to be, around 1,200, do you think, Jimmy?
I think about 1,200, yeah.
So the equivalent in APS-C, there aren't any. Well, there is. I guess there's the Fujifilm 8-16, which is of equivalent quality.
Yeah.
That is twice the size, and I think that's probably about 1,600, something like that.
But
not
that's
too
not
bad.
But that's not quite as wide though.
It's wider actually.
Yeah,
it's wide. It's a little bit wider.
It's an 8-25 in APS-C.
Yeah, but it's APS-C, so it's 12 to it's 8-16, so it's equivalent to 12 to 24. Whereas the Olympus is equivalent to 14, to 28. Yeah. But then if you go to full frame, you look at something like Sony G Master.
Yeah.
Equivalent to that. If you're trying to find a Sony G Master that's say 14 to 28 f2.8, 2,500 or more. It's a big jump in cost. It's not just size, it's cost for equivalent professional lenses. And without getting into any arguments about whether MFT can be considered professional in the same way that full frame can, I'm just going to compare them in terms of build quality, weatherproofing, robustness, AF speed, also consistency of results across the zoom range, across the aperture range, across the frame. The Olympus 7-14 is the equivalent in professional quality, format aside, to the Sony G Masters and Canon L lenses. Yeah. It just doesn't cost as much.
No. And just a side note, yes. I mean, I think people often overlooked about the meaning of professional. I think we discussed this before. You know, professional can use any gear. You know, like they often have multiple formats to do multiple things. You know, and just not necessarily that Micro Four Thirds being a smallest format. I mean, like widely available. Is any lesser than full frame, you know, depending on what that person does, what that photographer does for living, you know, and what sort of thing they do. And same thing can be said, you know, like medium format, you know, and 35mm or full frame is probably the most widely common formats that are being used by professionals these days. But it doesn't mean that APS-C, Micro Four Thirds, or even medium format is less professional than the full frame system.
I mean, if you're in advertising and you have clients who insist on medium format images, then you're going to have to get a GFX 102 or a Hasselblad. I'm not sure Hasselblad still does the XH series or a Phase 1, for example. Yep. So, you know, those are professional cameras for those photographers where the clients demand it. But if your job is real estate, for example, you're better off with Micro Four Thirds because you've got more depth of field, you've got all the stabilization you could ask for, you've got all the focal range you could ask for. Anything else is just indulgence. You know, if you do your real estate business with full frame, unless you're selling $5 million properties, it's just overkill. You're just indulging yourself and making your life more difficult.
Yeah.
And this whole thing of what's professional and what isn't, it's become locked into cost and quality instead of being what it should be, which is professional usefulness. So if I use MFT cameras for product shots because they give me more depth of field and I can do it handheld without camera shake, and even after that, I'm still downsizing them for delivery to my clients. It's a professional camera. How can you call it anything else?
The funny thing is, I mean, obviously, you know, we've seen time and time again about you know, GoPro is being used for this type of shots, you know, in a movie and things like that. So, you know, like these sort of action cameras may not seem like a proper professional tool for it, but there's certain type of situation where you can only mount the tiny little camera on the helmet. And that's when you use little action camera. I mean, that record just enough quality to present itself, and that's a professional camera because it is used in professional environment.
I think GoPros have become professional cameras. I mean, you wouldn't call a GoPro a professional movie camera, but at the same time, you can't put an Arri or a Red on a stick on your handlebars. It can't be done. So it all depends on the context. But I don't know. I do get a bit frustrated that there's this idea that full frame is more professional than APS-C, which is more professional than MFT, which etc. It's I think we have to try and separate what things cost from how good they are, because it's not always the same. Not always the same thing. So yeah,
Yeah.
Eduardo agrees. Thank you, Eduardo. If you get paid, it's professional.
Yes, it is. Angela actually came back as well, kind of funny because
Yeah,
regarding the S9, they have also introduced a new Lumix app to download the media using very fast 5 gigahertz Wi-Fi in camera, and Manny and
yeah.
others were impressed with the app. There's no doubt about it that technologies are there, and I mean, I might give credit to Lumix. I haven't tried it myself, of course, but if they do make it somehow good and fast, communicating between the app and the camera, that would be awesome. But
I
from
th-
my experience on Nikon and Olympus and OM systems, all their apps are very, very slow in most cases, and
I I I
it's
think
not
my
really
experience
usable
is
in my opinion.
I'm not sure it's the speed of the transfer that's ever been a problem for me. What it is
The connections,
I
the
I use a
initiation.
phone. I use an iPhone, and iOS will not let an app choose your Wi-Fi network. It has to ask you if you agree. So every time I want to connect a camera to my phone, I have to launch the app, start the camera, obviously, then wait for the app to recognize the camera. Then I have to give permission for iOS to join the camera network. This takes time.
Yeah.
And once it's connected, that's fine. But then if my camera goes to sleep, the app loses the connection. I have to do it again. Or if I just want to quickly take one shot, just imagine I'm an influencer on in some fancy hotel in Monte Carlo. I want to take a picture of my dinner and share it straight away. Then, camera out, camera on. Is the Wi-Fi on? Phone. Start the app. Yes, that's my camera. Right. Shall I change to the camera Wi-Fi? Yes, do that. Okay, done it. Now I've got to use the app to navigate through the photos that are on the camera. Then that's the one I want. Select it. Then I can send it. That is not as quick as the phone. That's the problem,
No,
I think.
it's a multi-step
If
procedures.
if you're gonna be at the Ritz Hotel in Monte Carlo, if there is a Ritz Hotel, photographing your lunch for Instagram, just do it on your phone. Do it on your phone.
But by the time you connect, download the pictures, your main course would have gone cold.
The waiter thinks you don't want it, they've taken it away. Or they want your table. Get out.
Yeah, I to be honest, I mean, if I try, I mean, I would like to try to see whether how fast it is if everybody claims it's so fast, and I would like to see it myself. But my experience so far, almost all the apps so far, regardless what brand it is, has been a disappointment. Nothing is easy or straightforward, and it's always some hiccups as well. Not even if you manage to do it, and there are times I find that when you, let's say, transfer a bunch of files, not one single file. If you transfer a bunch of files, it crashes. The app just
Something
crashes.
happens.
Something will
Happens.
happen,
Yeah.
and just have to start all over again. It's like, oh god, it just really got me every single time.
Yeah. Yeah. I think that's one of those occasions when if your job is live streaming from locations or taking that kind of picture of your Insta feed,
Yep.
then your phone is the professional camera that you need, I think.
Yeah.
It's just the right tool for the job. You might think, I wish I had that lovely shallow depth of field from a proper camera, but get real. You just need to get the shot and get it done and get it sent. Use your phone.
Maybe that day
Sorry.
will come. Maybe that day will come. Well, I'm still waiting for Mr. Camera Alice to do something, and because
be good.
supposedly that will be the solution. So hopefully that will come on at some point. We shall see. We shall see. No.
The main the weak link is the camera and its Wi-Fi. The camera has to be on. The Wi-Fi has to be on. Your camera mustn't go to sleep, and your phone has to be willing. And you have to authorize your phone if you've got an iPhone to use that Wi-Fi. You just go around the houses, and I find it about one time in three it just doesn't work. I have to switch everything off and do it again. So I've used it. I've used it with my Canon for doing live intros for YouTube videos. You set it all up. You have the app so you can see how it all frames up.
Yeah.
And then hit record from the app. But unless you've extended your camera's power, what's the word I'm looking for? Shutdown time. That's the moment it decides, right, I'm going to sleep. And so your connection goes, you have to get up, go all the way around, start the camera up again, start the app again. It's just horrible.
It is. It is.
Maybe I'm doing it wrong.
Maybe I am too. I'm not entirely sure. Carlo just have a comment about Pentax camera. He's a Pentax shooter. Has been using it for some time now, and the only reason he hasn't left is because it doesn't do anything else apart from still photography. And he loves all those DA lenses and FA lenses. I wouldn't disagree because Pentax does have some really nice cameras in the past. I do love their lenses. And to be quite frank though, I mean, I had a couple of Pentax film cameras, but I've never got into the digital system. Although, having said that, I did have the K10D, if any of you still remember the K10D.
You have the K10D?
I have the K10D. I have the limited edition K10D, the brown one, which is only limited to 1,000 pieces worldwide. And I still have that camera in my cupboard, unused. It's still in the box.
I can't believe you. The K10. I, of course, had the K20D.
Yeah.
So, but you know.
I
don't use it either.
To be honest, I love the ergonomics of K10D, but the two things I didn't go full into the Pentax digital system at the time was that they only produced APS-C at the time. Not that I have anything against APS-C, but the thing is, at that time, Pentax only have a bunch of full frame lenses or 35mm lenses. So if I adapt those lenses onto the K10D, which has a 1.5 times crop factor, my wide angle becomes standard lens. I don't have anything wide enough to say covering a 24 equivalent because they didn't have anything wide. And same as other lenses, there's just not enough lens choices when they first launched the digital system. As much as I like the ergonomics of it, and I didn't really have much choices when it comes to optics, I could potentially mount the old K-mount manual lenses on it, but then remember back in the old days, manual focusing on DSLRs isn't as easy as what we have today. Now we don't have peaking, magnifier, anything like that. Trying to focus it properly is going to be really, really difficult.
I mean, the paradox I've got is I've got a bunch of old Pentax film lenses, which are actually quite good. They're better than I thought they were, but they don't go well on my K20D for all the reasons you just described. But they work brilliantly on my Sony A7 II because I've got an adapter. First of all, the A7 II is full frame, like the lenses. The adapter cost me £15 at the photography show, and the focusing is so simple because I can just punch into focus in the EVF or on a rear screen, and at last I can focus these lenses accurately, and that's what they need. If you try and use an old Pentax film lens on one of the DSLRs, their manual focus, you guess, you hope you've got it right. You don't realize how precise you have to be to get the best out of these lenses. Yeah. And it's only on the Sony body, I mean, I know, sacrilege, that I can get the best from these lenses. It's wrong, but it's just how it is.
It is, unfortunately. But having said that, Pentax do make lovely cameras, and but unfortunately, like I said, I just haven't had the pleasure or the opportunity to fully explore the system. I would like to try the black and white camera, though. I think that's
yes.
It's not just novelty, but I always wanted a black and white only digital camera because I love black and white film photography, and but like there are only a handful of black and white only digital cameras these days. I mean, I think Pixie and also obviously Leica monochrome, and then Pentax. So there aren't many choices there.
phase one, if you've got about 50 grand to spare.
Well, I don't have
Phase
50 grand.
one
Let alone like a monochrome, which costs you another 8 grand.
I know.
So it looks like Pentax may have a very unique proposition that if you really want a black and
Wow.
white digital camera, because it's still expensive but relatively affordable compared to the rest
I
of
think so, yeah.
the game. Yeah. So
It's an
you never know.
interesting call.
Next thing you know, I might actually have one.
And the black and white sensor, a color sensor converting the black and white is not the same as a black and white sensor. They are structurally different, and a color sensor is always compromised for black and white photography.
Yes.
Because it's combining 3 color channels and interpolating color data to produce each pixel.
Yep.
Whereas a true black and white sensor, it isn't. You're getting a full data capture for every photo site with no interpolation.
Yeah.
It's different.
Oh, there are a couple of comments there. Before that,
Yeah.
I think Gordon has say something. You found your website, Gordon, and I think that you got some really good articles.
Oh, thank you. Is that to me or you?
I think to you.
Oh, right. Oh, thank you.
Yes.
I probably need to write some more. It's probably been about 6 months. I'm terrible. It's just been a very hectic period. And
Yes,
it
yes.
goes on the back burner, doesn't it? Sometimes.
Likewise.
Like you and your video editing, Jimmy.
I know. I'm so behind. Angelo's asked both of us actually, which lens you never own but would like to own. That's a tricky one.
I think ever since I've seen what it does, I think probably like a Summilux, which is the f2 one and which is the 2.8. Summilux or Summicron?
Summilux is 1.4. Summicron is f2.
2.
And Sumiron is 2.8.
I think
2.5.
then the f2 Summicron, is that right? 28 millimeter. It's just one. The shots in general I like. They're very, very punchy. Again, I think because it's probably a simpler lens optically.
Yeah.
So there's plenty of vignetting, but that's what these older lenses are like, and you can deal with that. But ever since I saw what it looked like shooting a portrait indoors at wide open at that kind of typical portrait distance, the way it rendered the sharpness and the blur, I've just not seen anything like it. So that might be my lens.
Ooh.
Very analog.
Yeah, I'm not entirely sure, and which lens I would like to own. I mean, I guess I've kind of tried everything, and well, almost everything. I wouldn't say everything.
Thing is, nothing is perfect.
No.
If you keep looking for the perfect thing, you'll never find it, and you'll always be a bit disappointed.
But I tell you what, a lens that I've never owned but would like to own is possibly, if I can afford it, would be the Sigma 150 to 3. Was it 400 2.8? You know, the big massive green beast that weighs about 20 kilo.
Oh, the thing.
Like a torpedo, you know.
Yeah,
like
I think it goes up to 600. Is it 200 to 600 or something like that? I don't know.
150 to 600, but f2.8 full frame lens.
Isn't that one called the Bigma? The Big Sigma, the Bigma.
Yeah, I think there's many names to it, and but yeah, I guess that would be the lens, because I don't think I could never ever to justify to get that lens. Even if I could justify, I don't think I could use it properly, because you do need a proper big massive tripod to stabilize the lens to use it.
So what would you photograph with it?
I don't know. I recently
I thought you
saw
had a plan.
I recently saw a guy actually review this lens retrospectively and mount it on a Michael Four Third body. It's actually a very funny video. I like that video.
Only on YouTube.
And he reviewed that lens. It's quite a guy, and I like that video a lot. He was photographing everything, you know, from portrait to animals to anything, with a Michael Four Third camera. I think he set the biggest lens to the smallest camera. I think he mounted onto the GM1. So which is the same camera that I have right here, and then you mount that big massive thing onto GM1 via an adapter, and it just looked ridiculous, but it's kind of fun to watch. But yeah, I think that will be a lens I would like to own, and it's just one of those things that I don't know what to use it for, but it's a lens that I don't think you will see many on that anyone will have. It's a lens that I probably, out of rarity, I would like to own one of those.
And I think I'm going to change my story now. I think I might just say that Fujinon 50 f1. I might swap back to that. I think. I don't know.
But okay. But I know the Sigma lens is a bit crazy. But if I thought about one lens now that I would like to own that I haven't tried, is the Fujifilm, also Fujifilm, but the 56 f1.2. Was it the AD? The
APD, the apodization element. I'm not sure they still make it, but yeah.
No, they stopped making them. And I would like to try that lens, actually. And because obviously being a portrait guy, I would like to have a portrait lens that's unique. And I've heard that lens has some very unique rendering compared to the standard 1.2 version. Even though because of APD elements, and it will decrease the light intensity by about 1 to 1.5 stop, I think.
It is quite a lot. I mean, I did attend a thing with the Sony did one a few years ago. I think it's 100 f2.8. They did explain the equivalent exposure is more like an f4. I mean, you get f2.8 depth of field, but because it lost so much light, because the apodization element, to my understanding, is like a radial graduated filter. So that instead of getting a hard bokeh disc, it actually feathers it outwards. So you get a very soft bokeh disc, but much less light overall. But
so,
it's
their version of feather bokeh.
It is. And I think Canon and Nikon have done a slightly different version, the defocus control. So I recently did an article for AP on this, and I had to look a lot of this stuff up. So the spherical aberration is something you don't want in a lens, except when you do, because the quality of the background blur is improved with this kind of this spherical aberration. So the Nikon and Canon defocus control lenses, I believe, shift a couple of the lens elements about to change the spherical aberration properties, so that the defocused areas take on a different appearance. But I think the apodization element is probably more effective and probably preserves a bit more sharpness. I'm going to guess. I don't know.
That's definitely a lens that I would really like to try. I think, like you said, Sony has the version. In fact, that Sony lens that you mentioned, it was actually a Minolta lens. We've been rebranded to Sony.
You're kidding? Is it?
Yes, it's actually.
That 100 2.8?
Yes, you Google it. It's actually a Minolta lens.
Oh, they were telling me it's got XA elements. We designed it from the ground up, and nobody else has got a lens like this. Oh, the cheeky monkeys!
You can actually find a Minolta version if you're lucky enough.
Okay.
Yeah, I mean, obviously you know about the Minolta. Literally is what Sony bought, and
sure,
So a lot of the early optics were literally a rebranded Minolta lenses.
I know that's for the original Sony A-mount, wasn't it? I used to joke that only Sony would create a mirrorless camera with a mirror, because basically what they did, for those who don't know, is they had a fixed mirror that was translucent, so that half the light went through to the sensor, the other half got reflected upwards, not into an optical viewfinder, but for heaven's sake, another digital sensor, and then to an LCD display in a viewfinder. So it's like a mirrorless camera with a mirror and an extra sensor for the viewfinder. How could that have been a good idea?
Isn't that great? I mean, that's what I call invention.
Yeah. What's the opposite of invention? Devention. I don't know. But it was weird. It was weird.
Having said that, I think the Alpha camera is certainly an interesting camera. I mean, like, even though it may have some quirky text on it, but it was
Yeah.
pretty effective though. I mean, I haven't really used it myself, but I heard the tracking was pretty good on that particular camera, compared to other DSLRs at that time.
I think as well, everyone has forgotten the Sony A99 II,
Yeah,
which has been and gone. That was another alpha, so it had this weird fixed mirror. But 45 megapixel sensor, pretty fast frame rates, and quite snappy AF. That was a good sports camera and a good high resolution camera, even before the Sony A7R and the A9.
yep.
So it's a camera that's been forgotten, but it's actually quite good.
Well,
Yeah,
let's
but
see if
then-
we can find a
yeah.
cheap second hand and try it again.
Yeah, I'm not sure those alpha lenses though are going to
No.
be very good. So
No.
you're going to have to cross your fingers there, I think.
Yeah, absolutely. And so yeah, APD lenses. I think that they are probably what I would like to own, because I don't have any. I really don't have any.
So should do that, Jimmy. Should get the 56 1.2 APD and any old Fujifilm XT body.
Yeah,
Get an
XT1.
XT. Get an XT1. Mine was £280,
Yeah,
and it's
yeah.
like factory fresh. Nobody takes them seriously, but they're perfectly good cameras.
Yeah, I might try that. Because that's a lens that I really would like to own. It's the APD.
Yeah.
And I know the full frame one is either the Sony or the Minolta versions that I can, but they aren't cheap. I found that the APD lenses, second hand, they're looking for £800-900 each, so they're not that cheap at all.
And I always worry a little bit with second-hand lenses.
Yeah,
Because lenses are a bit more fragile than cameras. With a camera, if it doesn't work, it doesn't work. But with a lens, if it's been knocked out of true, or it's got some grot in it, or it's got sticky aperturing or diaphragm or whatever, that's quite an expensive service.
and worse still, I mean, I don't think you'll be lucky to find anyone who can repair those lenses now, because they're quite old. While the Fujifilm version is still, even though they stopped making them, but I'm pretty sure Fuji will still repair and fix them if anything goes wrong. So
I think you could probably find a new one if you hunted around a bit. The prices might have started going up.
I have seen them. I just haven't, convinced myself to pull the plug and just take the plunge and get it.
Then you'd be invested in yet another system.
Yet another system. Maybe I should ask Fujifilm to send me a lens to test it if they have any press copies still, and then I can see whether I like it or not.
Good luck with that. but seriously though, I think we tend to be fixed on the idea you must have one system. But if you're covering a wedding, for example, and you need to do a portrait, you're going to want your nice f1.2 APT portrait lens. Doesn't matter. It comes on a Fujifilm body.
No.
And next minute you're filming the ceremony on a Sony camera with a different lens. If you're using different lenses for different jobs, does it really matter if they're not in the same system?
No.
Maybe it doesn't.
I don't think it matters at all. You people who watch my videos know that I've been adapting lenses on my own, my Nikon Z camera, and via different adapters. Now I can actually use EF or Sony E mount lenses on this ZF camera. So in fact, I have a couple of E mount lenses and a couple of EF lenses on the Nikon ZF. I don't think people actually care what. At the end of the day, it's all the image that counts, right? And people look at the images. If it's beautiful, it's beautiful. They don't really care whether you're going to use a Micro Four Third, whether APS-C, Fujifilm, or anything.
Or it probably doesn't matter if you've got a mix of shots from the wedding, some on Sony, some on Nikon, some on Fujifilm, as long as you can get them all graded to look the same.
Yeah,
it won't matter. I
mean, like, as much as I don't like using smartphone, but I know there were a couple of weddings I did the albums for the brides. That I did actually sneak a couple of iPhone photos in it because it was just a great. It was just a great moment. My camera I was actually resting. There were a couple of break sessions. I actually resting, so I put my camera down, and just had my phone with me. So I was walking around the venue having a break, and I saw this moment happen, and I thought it was quite funny, and then I just used the phone to snap it, and it was good, you know. So
Yeah.
why waste it if a photo is a photo? So I just used that, and then the bride loved it.
So I think my one question to finish with would be, would you ever buy a camera for a lens? There's this particular lens that does the job you want, that you like. Would you
Yes.
buy the lens and buy the camera? I'm not saying, you know, you like a range of lenses, would you
Yep.
swap to that system? I'm just saying one camera for one lens.
I would.
Yeah, I think I would. I would.
I
I mean,
definitely would. I think that's the whole. I think that's the question to
X100V.
yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
I think that's the question of or that's the message of today's chat is about that, you know,
Right.
and how
Yeah.
how we feel about lenses. Is the lens in questions in your view will be good enough or important enough to warrant your decision in terms of buying it with the camera, because even though it's not a system that you use or mount that you use, if that lens is so good that you want to get it, but you don't have that system or a camera body to mount it on, would you get that lens and a new camera to use it? I think that, yeah, I think both Rod and I said we would definitely do that. And I've done this before, many years ago now, although I haven't done it recently. And I think I had a which lens was that? I'm trying to think of that now. I sold it. It was, I think it was a Contax. It was a Contax lens, way back in the film days. And there's this Contax lenses were very different to any other mounts. So they have a Contax mount, and so you can only use that lens with a Contax camera. So I had to buy the Contax camera to use that lens. So I did that, and so yes, I did that once. I'm pretty sure I will if I see another lens that I would like to use. But I think fortunately these days that most mirrorless cams are quite easy to adapt to older lenses. If you find anything that you may like in the past, it's very likely you can actually adapt those lenses in your current system, whether it's crop or not. You know, you can certainly do something about it. Hard to say about modern mirrorless cameras because the flange distances are so shallow. So if you like a certain RF lenses that you think those are dream lenses of yours, then you probably have to buy RF camera to use it. And
Yeah, I think, yeah. But I think maybe if you absolutely fall in love with the RF 85 1.2, then you'll probably consider buying a body just for that lens if you feel it has that reputation. Or if you decided you just had to have the old EF 85 1.2, it would probably be worth picking up an old or a used Canon DSLR body. Probably wouldn't matter a whole lot which one, just be able to use that lens.
Yeah, that's a good idea. Stan Foxworthy.
I know.
On
I'm
board.
trying not to read that. Trying not
to. You still want one, Rod?
Yeah. I still think the pen is the future.
I think so. I think so.
Stan, what's the easiest way for me to send my email? Can I put it in the chat? Is that the best way to do it? What do you think?
Yeah, Stan, just hit him up. I know he wants one.
Jimmy, where can I put that in the chat? I don't seem to be able to type into the chat window. Is that guest chat?
I think it's guest chat. Yes.
So,
it should be a box underneath your chat room that you can reply to him.
I've got comments here, but I haven't. No, I think because I'm a guest.
Okay. Oh, there you go. I am downsizing before. Okay. So Stan, if you list out a way that Rod can contact you, he will message you.
Yes. I don't seem to be allowed to type anything into the comments.
But Stan, you and I are friends on Facebook. You can you can direct message me, and I can perhaps give Rod's email to you, so you can email him directly.
Yeah, that'd be good. Be good. But be nice. Be nice. I haven't got that much money.
Well, well, which one are you getting though? The black or the silver?
Silver.
You like the
Every
silver?
time. Yeah.
Okay.
Not getting both. I'm not falling for that one.
Why not? They're rare breeds these days.
I know. MPB's sold out. They might have some more in, but for a long time, the only ones on MPB have been quite battered, well-used ones, which I don't particularly fancy. So, yeah. So if you can do that, Jimmy and Stan, we'll talk. We'll talk. Are you in the UK, Stan? That's all I need to know, really.
No, Stan is in the US.
Oh, what? Oh, right, okay. So now that's going to work then.
Well, we'll see. You never know. You never know, right? Okay. You never know. Okay. So I guess that would conclude today's chat about lenses. And please do leave us some comments about your thoughts about today's session. About lenses, whether you would give up everything to get a lens of your dream. And buy a camera just to use that lens. I think it's an interesting thing because we always said that lenses are important for photographers, and also they are indeed the eyes for your photography, because that's how the lens, the lens sees the image, the lens draws the image, the lens produces the image, not the camera sensor. The camera sensor does so much, but the look, the feel of it is always coming from the lens optics, and that's why. And
also, the really basic stuff like the zoom range, and the maximum aperture, all that stuff's quite important.
Absolutely.
You have to get the right lens for the job, and not every system has that right lens for you.
Exactly. So if you want some crazy lenses, and I'm pretty sure, there is a whole list of them. I have a couple. We talk about some of the lenses that we really enjoyed today in this chat room here. So if you missed that conversation, it's obviously you can rewatch this and re-listen to this early in the chat later at your pleasure, at your own time. It's no force. And like I said, this particular live stream is also listed as a podcast on YouTube Music, so you can always listen to it if you don't want to see our faces. That's totally fine. But if you do, and remember that we are here every Wednesday unless there's something come up, especially coming to summer months now, and my schedule is very, very packed, and so I'm pretty sure Rod is the same as well. So we may occasionally have one or two delays here and there or cancellations, but that's only purely because of jobs, not that we are forgetting about you. We want to continue this live stream and this community. I think it's really fun, and so hopefully you guys all enjoy that as well. So until next time, we should say goodbye for now until next week, I guess, and hopefully there's nothing to delay us. So thank you very much for joining us, and we'll see you next week. Bye for now.
Bye.